Hello everybody, it's me, Jakub.
I'm Anna, and we're from Double Proficiency.
Yes, we are. We have a little bit of a different video than the usual couple we uploaded recently because of reasons. Elucidate.
Reasons. The reasons are that we wanted to make some other content than the thing that we do all the time. As you may or may not have known, we have published a book called Herbalist Primer, which looks like this. And it's kind of cool illustrated guide to folklore and magic of real world plants. And thanks to the Kickstarter, it kind of blew up and we were able to make several stretch goals. One of them is an adventure that we're gonna be talking to you about right today.
So yeah, we are going to be talking about Song of the Hedge, which is the adventure that we wrote as a stretch goal and a companion piece for the book. That is a little whimsical story about an hedgehog in trouble and players who help them while they are being turned into mice.
Yes. Song of the Hedge is a concise adventure for any...
This big.
It's like 20 pages. It's a concise adventure written for any system or setting that you would like to play it in, as long as it allows for some kind of fantasy, whimsical material.
Yeah, I mean you can technically run it in Cyberpunk if you want to as a VR adventure.
Ooh.
In virtual reality.
Or a dream.
Yes, or a dream, and then the players would finish the adventure, then they'd be like football practice, you know.
You could also play it in Call of Cthulhu, and I'm sure that would be the biggest surprise for all of your players.
Yes. I want to do it now. Anyway, the adventure is completely system agnostic and it's built in a non-linear way, so you can play it out as a short one-shot or a long campaign, however you prefer. And it has no mechanics coming in it, no specific dice rolls except for some couple small ones. So you can easily adjust it to whatever game you're playing and add any stats of whatever thing you want. If you want some combat encounters or whatever in it, you can do it on your own, because the adventure doesn't contain any mechanics or stats for any game, so you have a free reign as a GM. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today. We are going to be going through it basically page by page. We're going to show it to you quickly, like haha, so you can take a screenshot, or just we are also going to probably edit it onto the picture. Yeah, and we're going to be taking you through the adventure and give you suggestions about how we would imagine you play it. That doesn't mean you have to follow them. I just wrote that thing. How you play it is up to you, and nobody's going to come to your house and take your book away from you. At least not when you're awake. So all good.
Let me start off by actually telling you what the adventure is about. Farmer Baldwin, who was suddenly struck by a lot of ill fates, is pushed to the ultimate solution of reaching for magic to bring some rain to his domain and regain his gains.
Yes.
I am so sorry for rhyming. This whole adventure is written somewhat like a song or a ballad or a storyteller's like a bardic story.
Yeah, I when writing it, I aimed for it to be like this kind of a whimsical fairy tale-ish narration, so that it is also fun to read, not only to run.
Yes. So Farmer Baldwin decided to read for magic, which includes using a magical herb called Raskovnicha, which can only be found by small critters. So instead of asking, because he doesn't know how to speak, he doesn't know how to speak to animals, so he entrapped a little hedgehog. His name is Hedgemund.
Hedgy for his friends.
Hedgy for his friends. And Hedgy, because he is just a small hedgehog and not prepared for adventures, used his fae friend Alrauna, and together they turned the player characters into mice and enlisted them to help.
Yeah, and it's easy to put into basically any high fantasy system. Like, I don't think you were going to need any specific guidelines on how to pull it off in games like the world's okayest RPG game or Pathfinder, and And that should, come without saying. There are fake creatures in there. There are magics that can transform your shape into something else, so you can just play it straight as it is. It will require a little bit of mental gymnastics to pull off in other games, like low fantasy and like dark fantasy systems like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay should be relatively easy. However, like in games like Cyberpunk or Call of Cthulhu or Vampire the Masquerade, it's gonna be a little more fanciful to get it working. Like obviously in Cyberpunk, Shadowruns and all your science fiction games, you can just have a holodeck adventure or a virtual reality Netscape situation. You might actually tie it up to your ongoing campaigns. Maybe the whole thing is just an elaborate security system for the corporate vault, where somebody's erotic Naruto fanfictions are held, so you can use it later to blackmail him. Go off, have fun. That's what Cyberpunk is there for.
Now I wanna play Shadowrun again. The adventure is set up in a rather flexible way. Let's put a diagram up here. You have a starting point and you have an ending.
The diagram.
But how and in what order the players will approach the adventure is up to them. You can play it in any game system with adjustments we just mentioned. So let's move on to the story, so you know how to prepare.
Generally, the story can begin at any point wherever your players camp out. We're gonna go with the fantasy because that's the easiest way. In a fantasy, your players can, for example, camp out for the night and then they wake up and all their gear is massive, it's huge, and they don't know what's going on. And then they look at their hands and their mice. Like, I hate when that happens, but it does sometimes happen that way. And then before they really get a chance to get angry about it, you can introduce them to Alrauna and Hedgie, who can of course communicate with them, because as animals they are going to be given the ability to speak with other animals together with the spell that turn them. And Faye and the Hedgehog are going to explain their plight and say that they have to recover Raskovnice so that Hedgemund can return to his ancestral home, where all his fancy stuff is, and in return they're going to give a fanciful feast and a great reward, and it's fun.
And maybe a friend.
And maybe a friend. So just generally making it clear from the start that they've been turned into mice so that they can talk with the hedgehog, and if they say no, then there is no point forcing them to do it. It's nothing I personally think not many things make games less fun than being forced onto the adventure. So I would personally play those NPCs off as friendly and in trouble, that just use this method to communicate with the big people.
The spell is only supposed to last until the next dawn, so the player characters have a day to help. If they don't want to help, they will not be forced, but if you chose this adventure to play with your group, then you are probably expecting them to help.
Yeah, you can always talk with them out of game. I know some people consider this metagaming to explain anything out of game what's going on in the game, but I personally think that those people are wrong.
Okay, moving on. Speaking about things outside of the game, let's quickly cover the most important topics and potential content warnings for this adventure. It is written to be playable with any age of group, so
the information is also in the book.
Yes, of course. And it generally touches up on environmental matters like droughts, and there are some venomous spiders and snakes, so if your group doesn't want to deal with that, replace it with some other.
There are also cats.
There is also a cat, yes. If you're unhappy with any type of those creatures, feel free to exchange them for something that isn't going to cause anybody any trouble. There is a ghost of a hedgehog to interact with. There are talking plants and toxic plants, and depending on your character choices, there might be some harm caused to animals, but the adventure is written in a way that it can be played entirely without violence, because you can communicate with animals, you can use stealth. At no point you have to actually have combat encounters.
Yes, any combat or harm you put into this adventure is you do it. It's not in the book.
Yes. Oh, there's also a lot of puns. We consider that a fair wording. So.
Yes, puns are the highest form of humor, as is evident by anybody who has a sense of humor. So should probably be prepared to face a little bit of them. They're not egregious, but there's a few.
Be prepared.
Yes. I didn't originally intend this game to be so funny, but I just can't stop myself.
It happened.
Yes. Okay, I did this on purpose. I'm not gonna lie to you. That basically it. As far as like dice that you will require to run this adventure ahead of time, you need a d6 because there is, aside from the main meat of the adventure, there is also a short little page that explains to you where you can put random encounters and what kind would be fitting. Of course, you can adjust it by the teams and the system that you are playing it and pick specific most fitting obstacles and animals and monsters that would fit the situation. And since everybody's tiny, it's generally always good to steal stats from something relatively human size and just keep your stats as they are and just narratively reskin a goblin to be a rat or something.
That's a very valid point, because the whole point is to not recreate the character's stats in a mouse form. Just let the characters keep their own abilities and gear if you want to, and just let them proceed just at a narratively smaller scale.
Yeah, so instead of describing how your fireball encompasses the entire room, you can just go like this. Just scale narration down while keeping stats as they are. That's going to be the easiest way to do it, and then you can just pick stats and types of opponents as you normally would for the game that you are running with your party, the same way you are used to, and narratively change them up. Of course, if you want to design a whole slew of mouse abilities and
or you're playing Mouse Ritter.
Yes, if you're playing Mouse Ritter, you literally don't have to do anything with this game. You can just run it.
Yes.
Yeah, also it is like perfectly suitable for games like Root without any adjustments, because you can already play mice in there. So if you play that kind of a game, then you can.
Then this adventure is already done.
Yes, you don't have to adjust anything. Anyway, let's finish the adjustments and maybe go with the beats step by step. So there are multiple story steps that you have to take before you can encounter the final boss and free the hedgehog. There's a cat hair in the air.
Okay, first step to actually discover where Raskovnice as a magical plant is hiding and how to get to it is to get some advice. And in this case, we are trying to get advice from a hedgehog ancestor who has passed away ages ago, like a decade, and his Hedgie's grandpa?
Something like that, yeah.
The heroic Hedgar has to be called forth using some wormwood leaves. So the adventurers will have to embark on a...
We're talking about this chapter specifically?
Yes. So the adventurers will have to embark on a very dangerous path through the tall grass and towards the dark patch of wormwood. There are some venomous spiders on the way, so if you want to sneak around them, you can. They're not supposed to be a big threat, just a reminder for the player characters that they are very small and other things because of that are very big.
Yeah, this is the first step of your adventure that you have to take before the non-linear stuff can happen. It is a good moment to put the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids scene in there, where they have to run away from a spider that normally would be like this size for them. And it's the perfect place for all those shenanigans that you can put in there that is going to clearly elucidate what sort of an adventure they are in and what sort of like physics they can expect, what sort of opponents and things like that. So you can treat it as sort of an opening rather than a challenge for them to overcome. Getting the wormwood shouldn't necessarily be difficult.
Yeah, and afterwards, when they already have it, Hedgie is going to perform a magic ritual and call forth the ghost of his hedgehog ancestor, and from there the player characters are going to learn what other steps they need to perform to actually arrive at Raskovnice and its hiding place.
Because you can't just find it, it's magic.
It's magic.
So yeah, basically Hedgar is going to inform the players that you need to get the Scream of a Root, Liquid Gold, Fruit of Mistletoe and Sage Wisdom before you can actually meet the plant. So, and you can approach those steps in any order you want. So let's move on to chapter 2.
The Screaming Root. Of course, this is about Mandrake, and you probably know all the stories about Mandrake crying when it's being pulled out of the ground. So this is what we're going here for, and the player characters need to find Mandrake, which is living in the forest meadow. Finding it isn't actually the challenge, because the as the player characters approach, the mandrake is already screaming. So locating is it's not the objective here, but the mandrake is screaming because
Brute the dog is digging it out because he heard the plant squeaking under the ground and decided that it's a squeaky toy and just wants to dig it out of curiosity, as dogs do. They step on frogs, dig out magical roots. How the players approach the dog is up to them. However, it is a big dog, it's a hound of some sort, so I would suggest using like giant stats if you're using normal player stats for mice, or if you decided to scale down all the stats and abilities, then you can just use a normal dog stats because your players have mouse stats. But I suggest just going with regular stats and use some sort of a giant or a dragon or some other insurmountable obstacle or monster that the players can't simply engage in combat, because that's going to clearly show the discrepancies between their normal abilities and the scale that they are in right now. And they can approach it in many ways.
Yeah, the puppy is not angry, it's not vicious, it just found a squeaky toy and it's just a curious puppy. So if the player characters manage to take its attention elsewhere, then it's just gonna run away and get distracted.
Yeah, the important thing about it is that it is a dog, so characters are not so much going to be able to get him to have a conversation with them without some special effects, because mice are just as fun to play with as a squeaking root would be, and they have to take it into account. So cleverness or some sort of distraction is like the best route to go around, but obviously, however they choose to do it, it's up to them.
Yeah, as a reward, the player characters are getting a bag of angry shrieks that they can later use to stun a opposition for a turn.
So instead of having to drag around a root that's bigger than they are, the mandrake is just gonna take a bag and like scream its frustration into it and just tie it into a little knot so the players can carry it without having to lug around a Ford Fiesta on a string through the rest of the adventure.
Yeah, and that's basically it for this part of the adventure. So we're going to move to another one, which is called Missing Bees, because bees are disappearing at an alarming rate. And
so they do.
They are always there unless you actually need to find them.
Yeah, so I strongly consider to just, instead of actually making this adventure, to just copy-paste into the booklet the entire script of the Bee movie, but Anna talked me out of it. So you actually have a step of the adventure in there. And yeah, basically you have to get an elixir from the bees because you have to get the nectar from the purest aconite crown, and mice aren't that great at collecting nectar. If the players figure out a way to get that nectar without involving the bees at all, like, just go for it. It's all about creativity. It's, if it works for you, have at it. But other than that, they'd have to find a bunch of bees and somehow convince them to get the job done. There is a couple of opportunities of conversations with the bees because it is a garden. So there is a bunch of sample NPCs with very suitable and not at all funny names in there. Like, for example,
there's a Benjamin who is being bullied by a gang of wasps. There is also Beatrice, who is a very ambitious bee who got trapped in a spider's net. And there is also Albert, who I did not come up with those names. Not that.
Yeah, no, it's our company's resident like goblin that did it. That's me.
Albert generally requires some sweetening of the deal because he's not gonna work for free.
Yeah, so he wants you to go and talk with the cat, whose name is Bartholomew. So yeah, generally the cat is of course going to eat the players if they want to engage it directly, because it is a cat, so at the very least it's not going to be a pleasant encounter. But the cat is not like predatory super panther, it's just a lazy house cat that isn't really interested all that much in hunting and foraging for its food. It's just doing it for fun, so that there are leeways of doing it without actually having to fight a cat.
If people at your table are getting antsy because they've been sitting for too long, you can also search for bees in Herbalist Primer. There are a couple of pictures that actually have bees on them. So we have a list, there is a list in the adventure if you want to use that. If somebody has the book at the table and you want to involve them in a more tactile way to just break up, just sitting still at the table, you can do that. If not, the player characters can do it in-game.
Yeah, it's the opportunity of having an adventure connected to a book is that you can just give it to the players as a handout and have them search through the garden by just flipping through the pages until they find the bees. And there is more than...
There's one just here, on the contents page. There's a bee butt sticking out.
Bee butts are the best butts. So yeah, there is also a bunch of other bees if the players have already talked with all the bees and failed to convince them, or just don't have enough of bees because bee puns are life. They are just the bee's knees, and I just cannot behave.
No, we cannot.
No. Well, let's cut this buzz and move on to the next chapter.
One way up. This one takes the challenge to completely new heights because the mice have to climb a very tall tree, which actually hosts a bunch of mistletoe, and climbing up is the challenge here because the mice are outside of the general protection of tall grass and dense bushes, and they actually have to be out in the open where they might be spotted by kestrels or hawks or owls or all the other animals that they have no chance of actually winning against.
Yeah,
So,
like human children.
so stealth and quickness is their best weapon in this case.
They do have to face off against an opponent that always knows that they are there and is going to try to stop them, the mice, from climbing the tree, because the squirrels assume that the mice are climbing in there to steal their stash. So they're going to be throwing berries or sticks down at them to toss the mice into the ground. So you can use this as having some telegraphed, attacks or events that happen where the players have to take some action or have some DC check and succeed at it, or else they're gonna be tossed down a couple of levels. But don't overdo it, so the players don't spend 2 hours under the barrage of acorns.
Falling from the tree does not hurt the mice.
Yes. They can't.
Their terminal velocity is not high enough to actually hurt the mice.
Yeah, and the ground is soft, so it doesn't necessarily have to have some deadly obstacles. But if you want to spice things up, if you want to add some tensions, the Bartholomew the cat can follow them around and maybe chase them up a little, so they have the added danger that if they fall, then a child is going to see a mouse with a wizard's hat and a robe and just going to take it and run away with it to play, and then the poor captive mouse is going to have to survive a tea party. Something like that is going to be a good, I think, distraction. Of course, the sky's the limit when it comes to your imagination.
And the reward in this part of the adventure is a couple of mistletoe berries, which are a great distraction if you need to distract somebody, but also you can eat them to grant yourself invisibility for a while.
This is not a medical advice.
No, this is very much not a medical advice. Please don't ever eat mistletoe.
Anyway,
it's toxic. Don't eat it.
yes, don't eat mistletoe. And let's move on to the next chapter.
Sage conundrums.
Indeed.
Well, if your characters are done with all the feats of acrobatics and they need to stretch their mental wings, this is absolutely the best place because Sage is just growing by the riverside and it's not hard to reach or hard to find. It will not bestow its flowers without some kind of test. It can be either a test of mind or a test of might. In case of might, well, if you wanna duke it out and have a combat encounter, that's your place. If it's a test of mind, then a Sage asks 3 riddles, which are...
you can of course use any riddles, we just give you a bunch of examples.
The examples included are on the level of kindergarten, so they should be the proper... They should be the proper challenge.
Chances are your party is going to be able to solve them in a couple of hours, but if not, you should probably allow them to just roll for it if they want to, because if somebody has a wise wizard character, then they should have a chance of figuring it out via a dice roll, of course.
They are not hard, but with riddles, You either guess it or you don't.
Yeah.
And if you don't, it can become a roadblock in the adventure, and you don't want that to happen. So.
Yeah. Sometimes in the like heat of the game, when you like a couple of hours and a couple of beers in, it might be difficult to like figure out some random riddle all of a sudden, even if it is connected to the themes of the adventure. So having outs is always good. And if the players can't solve one type of challenge, they can just go back to the plant and ask for another, and they should be allowed to switch, or to both of them if they want.
Or steal the flowers outright. Well, the sage flowers are actually a healing ingredient which also removes toxins, so the players will be able to use it during the final fight with Raskovnicha or in any other adventure, part of the adventure where healing abilities would be necessary.
Yeah.
With all the venomous spiders and snakes and all of that, it might come in handy.
Yeah, and with all of the ingredients or any of the ingredients, they can take them to Hedgie or don't, and they can use them during the final encounter with Raskovnicha or not, it's up to them. Generally, they can lug everything around and bring it to Hedgie at the end, or return to the hedgehog after every encounter to get some clues, resupply, rest, or whatever they need. Because they basically have 24 hours to finish the adventures of the in-game time. So they should be able to traverse the garden back and forth if they need reinforcements without a problem. And once they have all four of the ingredients, once they have all four of the ingredients, they can meet with Hedgie for the final time, where they're going to be prepared and for the journey with the use of the plants and magical ingredients they found, as well as magical ritual. And then together with Hedgie, they can go and fight the final boss.
Yes, the final boss is Raskovnicha, which is a magical plant that the full description you can find in Herbalist Primer. It's basically this quantum magic type of plant that you can only find if you already know where to find it, and if you already know that it's magical, and it brings rain. So Hedgie's quest is to collect leaves from the plant as a way to perform this rain-bringing ritual, and you as the player characters have to just keep the magic plant from hurting Hedgie. Just keep it occupied. However you decide to do it, it's up to you. So with the collected items from the previous 4 parts of the adventure, you have access to healing, you have access to flying, you have access to invisibility, and to shrieks of Mandrake that can stop the Raskovnicha for a turn. So you have plenty of opportunities to just solve the adventure, even if the mice don't have any of their standard equipment or magical powers.
Yeah, and if they get in trouble, Hedgie can get distracted from the quest of getting the leaves and help them. That's just gonna... so that they shouldn't be able to just outright be eaten by a magical plant. Hedgie is there to help them out, and the consequence of the players not being able to handle the job is the fact that it's gonna take longer, because the hedgehog can't at the same time get the leaves and help them. So he can't just carry the party. Healer, come on. Go.
This adventure, I'm not gonna say that it's impossible to fail the adventure, but it is written so also kids can enjoy it. So as long as the player characters have some kind of ingenuity or just the will to do it, they will probably accomplish it.
Yeah, you should keep in mind that you don't have to rely on the sort of tension that the game and lethality that the adventure has in by default. If you're playing a more dark and brooding and horror-y system with lots of action, you can of course make this whole thing into a deadly escapade, and add as much tension and pressure as you want.
Yes, but if you just want the player characters to be gently slapped with leaves and with twisting vines and maybe with some roots sticking out from the ground, that's also fine. Just adjust to your table, as always. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and after defeating the Raskovnicha, players have a new friend that is going to invite them to his hall for a feast, and it's not one of those musty and dark halls with the roots sticking out. It's a cozy hall.
It's a pretty and well-organized hedgehog hall.
Yeah, but the feast is still prepared by a hedgehog, so your mice characters are going to be served with the bowls full of finest, best spiced worms and
Millipedes.
millipedes and an occasional fly.
Maybe some honey and some berries.
Yeah,
If you don't want to eat beetles, you know. It's up to you. It's up to you.
yeah, exactly. You can also go all in if your players are squeamish about bugs. You can also go all in into anthropomorphization and make it like actual buns and porridges and stuff. Even an apple.
Ooh. Yes. Hedgie is also taken by the adventures and inspired to go on adventures of his own. So if the party desires so, Hedgie can join them as a friend. And he's a very ambitious, inspired. Well, he's maybe not particularly experienced, but he's a hedgehog, so he knows how to sneak around. He can get into small places, and just
He can always ball up and be thrown into somebody's face. He's not gonna like it, but
neither will the person who gets hit with a hedgehog. Alrauna will also bestow upon the player characters some magic cones, which can be later used to turn again into a small animal and talk with other
yeah,
creatures.
so it can be used later in the adventures. And it can also be a hook. Maybe the whole point why you are doing this adventure is to get those codes in the first place. How you weave it into your campaign storyline is of course up to you.
Yeah, and that concludes the story of Hedgie the Hedgehog and his brave adventures and the player characters helping him to bring some rain to the area, saving the poor farmer and all the critters living around him.
Yeah, so have you run the adventure? If so, let us know in the comments how did it go for you, how did it fare, and what sort of original and ingenious devices have you put into spice it up for your party. We are, of course, always curious to know how people are running with that stuff. You can also tell us what is your favorite plant or your favorite bee pun. And behold the list of our Patreons who are wonderful and we love them. And you can join them and then we will think you are wonderful and love you too. But not that way. So yeah, you can also leave a like for the video and click on the bee butt icon. It's a bell icon.
I wonder if there's a plugin to change it.
If there is, I will find it. And yeah, if you managed to get that far in the video, we have a special treat just for you for the end. Look at our cat.
You didn't ask for it, he didn't ask for it, but it happened.
Yes.
He's liquid now.
Yeah, yes, he's Anyway, thank you guys and see you in the next time.
Yes.
Bye.
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 The bee butt sticking out.
Bee butts are the best butts. Because, no, I can't do this. No, I must do this. I
Jakub,
love bee
no.
butts and I cannot lie.